country of vast diversity, the scrubland of the Kalahari, the largest canyon in Africa, mountain passes and the dunes of the Namib Desert. From long-forgotten ghost towns to vibrant communities on the Atlantic Ocean. And an abundance of wild animals on the roadside as well as the national parks. We're taking a four-wheel drive around Namibia in 17 days. Heading south from the capital, Windhoek, we take the obligatory picture by the Tropic of Capricorn sign before venturing into the semi-arid savanna of the Kalahari Desert. Our accommodation for the night has a stunning view of the region, with animals at our doorstep and a great pool to escape the desert heat. An afternoon nature drive through the private reserve gives us a chance to see desert animals, including these two bat-eared foxes, unusual for this time of day as they're usually nocturnal creatures. This is a Kori bustard, Africa's largest flying bird. Our last stop of the day includes two white rhino. Not really white in colour, the name is thought to be a corruption of the word wide because of its wide mouth. As the sun sets, we meet up with other guests for drinks, including a rehabilitated cheetah and his carer. Heading south, we stop off along the way at the Quiver tree forest. These trees are 200 to 300 years old and get their name because bushmen make quivers from the branches. They're also home to nests of sociable weaver birds, although you don't want to get too close as snakes often nest there as well. In amongst the boulders is a familiar rodent friend, the rock dassie, or hyrax to give it its proper name. We've seen these guys before at the top of Table Mountain in Cape Town, and unexpectedly they are the closest living relative of the elephant. Continuing our journey, we arrive at the gate to Fish River Lodge, although there are still 19 kilometres of rocky terrain to navigate before we arrive at our destination. Fish River Canyon is the largest canyon in Africa and the second largest in the world after the Grand Canyon. Each room here has a spectacular view of the gorge, and after a quick unpack we set off with a guide to a couple of scenic lookouts. Many people hike down to the canyon floor here, although the steep steps look pretty perilous if you lose your footing. Leaving Fish River Canyon, we're now heading west towards the Atlantic Ocean. As we near the sea, the dunes appear and bulldozers are deployed to keep the roads clear of windswept sand. We've arrived at the ghost town of Kolmanskop. Over 100 years ago, miners rushed here when diamonds were found in the area. By the end of World War II, the diamonds had all disappeared, and shortly after, so did the people. It's incredible to see how quickly the desert has reclaimed most of the buildings. On the lower side of the town, the houses have been cleaned up and we can see some of the artifacts of everyday living here. Seeing as we're so close, we have a brief pit stop at the coastal town of Luderitz and get a glimpse of the Atlantic before heading back inland. Back on the road, and after a desolate picnic stop, we find ourselves driving in the middle of a sandstorm. Thankfully, it only lasts a few minutes before the landscape of the Namib Desert and Tiras Mountains opens up in front of us. We hardly see any cars, people or animals along the next stretch of road, but we do encounter this lone jackal chewing on a rock. This has been one of the bumpiest drives so far, and my Fitbit says I've walked 15,000 steps, we're desperate for a toilet break, and somewhere along the way we've even lost the rear license plate from the car. It's a relief to arrive at our desert lodge for the night. Up at the crack of dawn the next day, we're travelling along the dunes of the Namib Desert to Sossusvlei. At the end of the road, we park our car and catch a shuttle bus through the deeper sand, where we follow other trekkers through limited visibility on this windy morning. We trudge up and down numerous dunes until suddenly the peaceful calm of Deadvlei appears in front of us. This area is a clay pan where camel thorn trees died out centuries ago and is extremely atmospheric and photogenic. Even though there are hundreds of people here, it can sometimes feel like you have the whole place to yourself. Back along the main road is another famous tourist spot, Dune 45. Ordinarily there are lots of people climbing this dune, but because of the high winds everybody is staying on ground level for now. Eventually some brave souls attempt the ascent, even with the risk of being blown off the edge. This is our longest drive of the trip, 6 hours through the mountain passes of the Namib Nachtluft Park. It's cloudy and noticeably cooler when we reach the coastal city of Swakopmund. After blowing the sand off our suitcases and checking in, we set off on foot to explore, meeting some ladies from the Himba tribe outside the hotel. The city is testament to its German colonial past, with breweries and beer gardens among the art and antique shops. We find a great biltong shop where we can stock up on supplies for the next few days. The following morning the sun's back out over the Atlantic, and we travel half an hour to Walvis Bay, home to a large colony of flamingos in the southern lagoons. This may look like snow on the ground, but it is in fact a large salt field, and a nearby factory is processing and shipping it out. At the end of the lagoon, we spy 3 jackals and notice the blood on their muzzles. As we track them towards the ocean, we see that they're feasting on a dead seal. Driving back, we find another jackal hungrily eyeing up a group of nearby flamingos. He watches and waits while the birds seem oblivious. I think our presence has put him off though, and he decides to have an afternoon nap instead. Our next destination is the rocky northwest region known as Damaraland. Our lodge for the night, Doranawas, looks like the sort of place the Flintstones might have built, with large wooden doors and stone-carved rooms. A local driver takes us in search of desert-adapted elephants. The heat and wind here creates dust devils, and we have to stop the vehicle to let one pass in front of us. While they're not strong enough to lift the car, they can cause quite a bit of damage from thrown up debris and stones. Soon we're on our way again, turning off the main road into a dried out riverbed, past baboons and various birdlife. It doesn't take us long to find a small family of 3 elephants. On the way home, we discover a couple of Vero's eagle owls. Unfortunately, the female looks as though her wing is broken, but we're told that the male should feed and care for her. After dinner, as the night sets in, we experience a unique feature of the property. The beds are on wheels, so that means you can move them to the outside veranda and sleep under the millions of visible stars in the clear African night sky. Leaving Damaraland, it's not long before we leave the gravel roads behind and return to smooth tarred highways. We stop for snacks, including our favourite, deliciously tangy Mrs. H.S. Ball's chutney-flavoured potato chips, and our not-so-favourite bland mix of salted pretzels. Interesting shapes though, including a parasol, a happy face, and possibly SpongeBob SquarePants. At our lodge, we get our first panoramic view of Etosha National Park before embarking on an afternoon self-drive. Our first animal encounter gives Wifey the opportunity to crack a bad joke.
Neil, it's a zebra crossing!
The best place to find animals is at the many waterholes dotted around the park, and at our first we find elephant, ostrich, springbok, zebra and oryx. Near the watering hole under a tree is a sleeping lioness, and as we turn onto the main road, there's a lion and a lioness who use the storm drains under the bridges to escape the heat of the day. Driving to another watering hole, we're joined by a large train of elephants going the same way. We're forced to stop our car to let the elephants weave across the road. Eventually, it's safe to pass the elephants and continue to the gate before sunset, with a brief stop along the way to watch a distant rhino. The following morning we were at Anderson's Gate at sunrise for another self-drive, and we immediately encountered two rhino in the open scrubland. In the distance is a spotted hyena checking out the area, but ultimately having a nap after being active at night. A drive to the salt pan in the north is pretty barren of flora and fauna, other than these three giraffe. Returning to the central camp, there's a tower which you can climb to see out along the various routes of the park. Each animal seems to have its own allotted time at the watering holes, and in the early afternoon it's the turn of the kudu, joined shortly after by black-faced impala. final stop at Etosha, another watering hole with elephants and springbok. Two juveniles have a bit of a tussle, but it looks as though they're playing rather than fighting. Right next to Etosha is Ongava Private Game Reserve, and we're staying at Anderson's, a beautiful lodge with a direct view over the reserve and their own local waterhole. There's a unique feature to this property. What looks like an innocuous mound of gravel actually covers an underground tunnel which leads to a private hide right next to the waterhole. Walking quietly through the corridors brings you out to a fantastic view of the animals. On the afternoon game drive, we spot a mountain zebra, much rarer than the standard plains zebra, and pure black and white from head to hoof. We also see another new antelope, the red hartebeest, with their heart-shaped horns. What we're really tracking though is lions. We've heard that there are a mating pair in the area, but it's a bumpy hour-long drive before we finally find them. When a lioness is on heat, the male lion has sex every 20 minutes, night and day, for up to 4 days. We believe this is day 3, but he's still going strong, even with an increasingly tetchy lioness and the risk of claw scratches and scrapes. "20 minutes later and they're at it again. We set off on a night drive back to the lodge. It's a disappointing drive though, as all of the animals have disappeared, apart from a known rhino feeding station halfway back. Back in our room, the webcams on the TV tell us when there is activity at the local waterhole. As soon as we see some movement, we rush to the hide, where there are a mother and baby white rhino. Once they've gone, a more cantankerous black rhino appears. Our last destination in Namibia is Okonjima Nature Reserve, best known as the home of rehabilitated cheetah and reintroduced leopards. There's no mistaking which animal is the main draw as we arrive at the gate. We're staying at Okonjima Bush Camp, a lush oasis in the safe zone of the park. Our first game drive is, of course, in search of leopards, and as they research many animals here, they use technology to track and locate. It doesn't take us long, therefore, to find a female leopard called Electra. She's had 2 cubs recently, and one of them is nearby. The mother skulks off to a nearby tree and the cub soon joins her to eat a recently killed warthog. At night, we're discussing the night sky when a twig snaps nearby. Our guide turns on his torch and there's a brown hyena only meters away. He's more afraid of us than we are of him, and we provide him with the leftovers from dinner. It's not long before a second hyena joins in the feast. Suddenly the hyena's hair stand on end as a third hyena surprises him, but after a quick sniff he's accepted into the fold. We're preparing to depart as the last hyena leaves, when suddenly a new animal appears, a porcupine. In the morning, we visit the Africat Centre, where they rehabilitate the cheetah. Is this just a solitary tree? Or is there a well-disguised cheetah sitting underneath? These two cheetah, Charlie and Chaplin, were rescued from a farm where they would have been shot for eating the cattle. At the nearby education centre, we learn how they trap and release the animals, and learn more at the visitor displays. In the late afternoon, we're on foot looking for Aardvark. We find his burrow on the riverbed, but he's still inside, so we take a half-hour break for drinks. When we return on foot, there's a shape outside the burrow, but it's not what we expected or hoped to see. The poor aardvark has been attacked by an opportunistic brown hyena. The hyena is distracted by our presence, but eventually comes back to complete the kill. It's not how we wanted to see the aardvark, but it is the natural way of things in the wild. Our last late night trip is in search of one of the most endangered species in the world, the pangolin. Poached to the verge of extinction for their scales, believed to be a hangover cure, these animals are extremely rare. Our guide spots a hole along the way and taps his stick to bring out a huntsman spider. Finally, we reach the pangolin burrow and see his telltale scaly body, followed by the tapered head curiously sticking out. Well, that's the end of our 2.5 weeks in Namibia. It's been the trip of a lifetime, possibly the best holiday we've ever taken. Our faithful Toyota has taken us all around the country without punctures or breakdowns. The scenery has been breathtaking, and the animal encounters have been full of surprise. Goodbye Namibia, and thanks for exceeding our expectations.